Okay, so you've set up a Drupal site, Drupal 8, I'm assuming. Most of this might apply to Drupal 7 as well. And you are on Acquia's cloud and you would like to install a module, but it's not as straightforward as it seems. So in this quick, or trying to make a quick tutorial, I will show you how to install a Drupal 8 module on Acquia's cloud, Drupal 8.2 specifically. So you should have your dev site all, like you should at least have the initial Drupal site up, and if you don't, then you need to search for an Acquia tutorial that will get you that far. But if you're like me, the tutorial didn't show you how to install a module on the cloud. It only shows you the much easier ways to do it. They conveniently forgot to mention the difficult way. So here it is. You need to sign into your Acquia. This is the Drupal site. I'm on the reports page, and you can see this is how Acquia basically gives you, at this time, Drupal 8.2.7, MySQL 5.6, 256 meg memory limit, PHP 5.6.3.0. So we need to log into the actual Acquia management console, which will be at acquia.com. So go ahead and click login up here on the top. They're probably going to ask you to do this twice. And enter your email and your password. Enter your email and your correct password. And a few seconds later, you will think you're logged in. You're logged in, I guess, to like, oh, it did log me in this time. Sometimes it doesn't always log you in. In that case, you just have to click log in on the new link that it gives you. And then, so right here you can see I have like one of my Drupal sites, my Drupal 8, like Learn Drupal 8 kind of site set up. Don't click on this stuff, because if you do, it will just take you to this link right here. It will take you to your like testing site thing. And just to show you that, I'll click open in a new tab, close this one, and there you can see that's this, and yeah, it's virtually worthless. So anyway, what you need to do is click manage or something else that gives you the style link at the bottom there, you see. And this will break your thing up into dev, staging, and production. And this dev right here is the one I'm working on. Staging, of course, is like you do all your changes pretty much in dev, and then you push them to stage. And with stage, you basically like pull your database from production into stage. So stage should represent your current production, and then dev should represent your changes that should work. And you sort of merge the two right here on stage. And if it works there, then of course you push to production if you have a paid account. So on this one, we're going to go to the dev account, and you can do this as well for stage. There's a little bit extra detail to do it for production, but you probably don't even want to do it like this for production. That should basically ideally be handled by your system administrator only, like no developer, Drupal developer specific people should get in here. That's kind of like a built-in protection. So go ahead and click manage on the dev one too. And this is the overview for, here's the URL that will actually take you to like the working instance of the dev site. So this is just where I start following along with the tutorial and hit the roadblock of I can't install a module. So I'll bounce back over here, and what you want to do right now is click on this live development link up here, because everything's locked and you can't really like change anything. So live development for dev and staging is the easiest way to enable it and say, hey, let me make changes. So we're going to do that. And that's going to take several seconds. Up here in the corner, you can see your activity, at least several seconds. So in the meantime, go ahead and copy the SSH URL by highlighting it and hit Control C. And if you try and just click it, it will highlight the whole thing, but if you're tricky, you can just get just the part you want. Just like that, Control C. If you highlight the whole thing later on, you'll just have to delete the username and the @ This is sort of like the site name right here, and then this .dev represents the fact that it's on the development environment, and then this is the host. So from there, as soon as live development is finished kicking in, what it's doing is it's supposedly extracting the current snapshot from Git, and it's placing it in the SSH in the folder in there. So now with SSH you have several options. You can either, from Windows, you can use Git for Windows with the MSys2 environment. You can use Putty, or you can use the Putty that's included with Winscp, which if you're on Windows, that's probably what I'd recommend as the simplest overall solution. So I will show you all of those methods right now. So we'll go to, in a new tab, let's go ahead and go to putty.org, putty.org. And from there, go ahead and click on this "You can download Putty here" link. And then there's going to give you several options. You can do a regular installer if you plan on doing a lot of work. Putty's basically like the de facto SSH tool from Windows computers. Install 64-bit if you know you have a 64-bit operating system. Otherwise, if you're unsure, install 32-bit. But it's the opposite if you're running on Windows, a recent-ish version of Windows Server. You'll need the 32-bit support files installed. So if you don't know, get the 32-bit version. If you know you're on Windows Server and you don't know, get the 64-bit version and get rid of Windows Server. It sucks. Okay, and then here's your other options. These are all the things available in Putty. Mainly the thing that you do need on your end is PuttyGen, and you can try either one of those. Same rules apply for 32 or 64-bit. If you're unsure, grab 32-bit. If you know you're running 64-bit Windows, grab the PuttyGen 64-bit. You don't have to get those if you're actually installing Putty as the full installer. But if you just want to generate your SSH key, which you need to access your instance, then grab that. And I don't think anything else down here is going to be... Here's a classic installer if you don't like MSIs. I don't blame you. And you can use that one. It's 32-bit only. Okay, so you'll download that. I'm going to go ahead and grab KeyGen 64. And then I'm saving it in a little temp directory I have. And from there, what you can do is click on that, and you will need a 4096-bit key, and it needs to be RSA. Click generate, and then just move your mouse over this area right here. As you can see, it changes the status bar when you move it. And that's just, like it says, it's generating quote-unquote randomness by moving the mouse. So you just have to do that for half a minute or however long it takes you. Once it fills totally up, you'll have a generated key pair that is random if you believe in randomness. Okay, so right here we can see we have the public key for pasting into open SSH authorized key files. So you can highlight that, right click select all, right click copy, or Control A, Control C on Windows. And you may want to save your keys too. So I'll save public key into my temp folder, and I'll just save it as pub key RSA 4096. And then we'll save a private key. And I'm saving it without a passphrase. You want a passphrase if you want to be compliant to process credit card numbers and things like that, but otherwise I'd recommend not using a passphrase. And then the same thing applies here. I'm going to list all files so I can get that name and then put it back on PPK. And this one is not going to be a pub key, it's going to be a private key. So I'm going to change that to private. And this PPK is Putty specific. Most programs on Windows that take an SSH key pair prefer the Putty version of it, even though it's doesn't fit exactly with the standards. Okay, so we have all that saved. I have this copied into the clipboard, and we can go ahead and shut that down. Another way to get to that is if you're using Winscp. I'll show you how to get that as well. Winscp.net, and then you'll click on download. And similar thing here, they have the installation, full installation, or you can get the portables that you don't have to install. So I'm going to say portable. You can run this from a thumb drive if you want. And it should start in just a second. There it goes. Save that to the temp folder. And that's 7 megabytes, just over 7 megabytes. So it'll take about that long to download if your connection's about the same speed as mine. And then right here you can see there's all those files. Just go ahead and hit extract, and you can extract them to whichever folder you'd like. If that's the method you used, if you installed it, just go ahead and click next and follow along with those directions. And then once you extract it, once I extracted this file, I extracted it to this Winscp folder right here. And we'll need to follow the directions on this site if we're going portable. I'm just going to show you that real quick. And then click portable use. And down here at the bottom it will tell you for full portability you need to copy this stuff, and inside of here you need to create a new file, and I'm going to Control A to select everything and get rid of it, and then we're going to name it winscp.ini, just like that, and go ahead and click yes when it asks you if you want to change your extension. If you can't see extensions, then you can click on view up here, or if your Windows is a little bit different, somehow get to your folder options. And then go to view tab on there, and this is how my settings look. I tell it, you know, where's some stuff like I usually check that. I tell it to show hidden files and folders personally. Uncheck hide extensions for known types is the key one there. Then click OK, and you should see extensions. Go ahead and make sure that one's named winscp.ini and there's no .text. If you have trouble with that, just if you rename it inside of quotes, inside of double quotes. Let me get rid of that. Go new, text document, Control A. Oh, apparently Windows 8 doesn't allow winscp.ini. And so from there you'll right click that file and go ahead and pick edit. And in here you'll paste in all that cool stuff we got from the other page, which is just basically telling it to stay within the local directory. Don't use the Windows registry. And then save that. And the reason I'm doing this is for this demonstration because I have a lot of personal information saved in my normal copy of Winscp, so I want to do a fresh, simple copy for this tutorial. But otherwise it would attempt to read from the registry and pull up my existing Winscp information. So right in here, this host name, go back to your overview, and it's not the one that you want to view your site on. It's down here, which we did copy and paste earlier. I'm going to get it again. Control C, come back over to Winscp, paste that as the host name. Leave the port the same. Your username is going to be your site name. Mine's Vegan-A's. And then it's going to be dot, and after the dot you either put dev, test, or prod for development, staging, and production respectively. So I'm working with dev, I'm going to call it dev. And then we need to click advanced, and go down to your SSH Key Authentication. And then for your private key file, go ahead and click the triple dots, and there's my old one. The one I generated should be in temp. Right here is the one I generated for this tutorial. So I'm going to select that PPK, hit open, and then it's going to assign it. Click OK to make sure it saves. And that assigns that private key to respawn to the public key, the matching public key. And then go ahead and enter your password in there as well. Which actually I don't think we need. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save. Now that should work. Log in. And this first time you log in, it's going to ask you if this fingerprint's okay. Go ahead and say yeah. And supposedly on Acquia, they regenerate their servers so often that you might get that question more than once. So it's hard to tell if you're actually being hacked by a man-in-the-middle attack or not. But it's the way it is with them. So we can see we successfully logged in over here because we don't have errors, and this side's filled in with some information. So I'm going to go ahead and disconnect from that session, and then if we just right click on this name, open in Putty, if that's all set up right, you should be able to get your Putty shell instance. That's one method of getting into Putty. Another method is if you have Putty installed on your computer, then you can just go ahead and click on Putty and go that route. If you are using the last method I'm going to show is if you use Git for Windows. And that's at git-for-windows.github.io, and then click download and go ahead and click save on that. Save that somewhere where you'll remember, or else it will probably automatically download to some downloads folder. It's 35.4 megabytes. And this will give you the MSys2 environment along with the Git tools, which is pretty much essential for doing this type of web development and server work. So then go ahead and click that once it's in, launch it. Next, go ahead and install it where it wants to. I'm not going to install additional icons. I'm going to go ahead and leave all this to default. Leave that the default. And right here is basically saying how much you want these tools to take over. If you love this program, you probably already know it, and if it's like your only Unixy kind of program and your only Git kind of program, then you can just tell it, click right there, and it will take over everything. If you use Windows command line a lot and you're used to their find and sort tools, this warning's telling you that you're going to have the Unix style find and sort tools, or POSIX, or whatever you want to call it. This one's their default choice in the middle. That just gives you a few things that are available system-wide on the command line that you'll probably need, and it kind of like keeps everything else stuffed in the corner so that it won't conflict. This first one stuffs everything in the corner, so you can't execute the tools that it installs unless you specifically go to where they're at. So that's what I'm going to do. And then right here, if you're unsure about this, go ahead and just click Use OpenSSH. Leave it at the default. And right here, same thing as well. If you're part of like a company intranet and you might have some weird certificate stuff going on, then you'll probably know it. Your system administrator, network administrator would know it. Otherwise, leave it default. And same thing with this. If you're unsure, leave it at default, which will check out Windows style line endings, because back in the day, Windows, Unix, and Mac all decided on 3 different standards for plain text files. So as much as you might think plain text is like the most natural way for anything to communicate, it's absolutely not true, because Windows uses a carriage return and a line feed, which sends the invisible virtual imaginary carriage back to the beginning of the line, and then it sends it down a line. Unix only sends the line feed, and that automatically creates a carriage return on their system. The old school Macs only sent a carriage return. So basically you end up with a little bit of garbage on some older Unix and Mac systems that don't know about that extra byte. This is probably your best choice. This is what most systems expect, the top one. And right here is asking you which type of console window do you want to use. This MTTY is a lot like if you're used to working with Linux systems and stuff like that. This is going to look virtually identical and give you all of that added functionality. If you're a Windows person and you want this to like blend in with Windows more and not look Unixy as much, then you have that option to pick the regular CMD style window right there, cmd.exe. File system caching to speed things up. If you're worried about disk space, uncheck that. Enable Git Credential Manager. Just a little bit of stuff to help people along there using GitHub or Visual Studio Team services. Enable symbolic links. All this stuff, just leave it as it is unless you have a reason to change it. Go ahead and install it. And you don't have to do this. This is only if you want to use Git on your local machine and or you prefer the real GNU Linux tools to be available at your disposal. Otherwise, you can stick with Winscp, which is a really good modern FTP, secure FTP, blended with Putty kind of program. Or if you don't want anything to do with Winscp for some reason, you can just use Putty standalone by itself. The directions for this msys git bash. Bash is what the command window's called. The thing they're referring to as mintty actually launches bash to give you your prompt and process everything. And those commands will be run, use the OpenSSH style of commands and stuff, as opposed to the Putty Windows style of things. So I'm going to tell it to go ahead and launch git bash and uncheck view release notes. And so right here we're in a Linux-like prompt on our local machine, and it looks like we're in our user folder, by default our Windows user folder, so that would be that directory for me, which is the equivalent of that directory on this local system, or my tilde directory. Okay, so we have that set up. So now to access this, we need to first generate our private key. And the way that Acquia Cloud, the two factors we got to remember is they want an RSA key and they want it to be 4096 bytes big. So we're going to do SSH-key gen, and we want a type of RSA, and we want the bits to be 4096. That's going to create that key pair, obviously. And it's going to ask us if we want to overwrite our existing key, if there happens to be one here. This command's identical on a Linux system, so if you have access to some pre-existing Linux system that you already have access to, you can go in there and punch in the same exact command, and it's going to ask you, it's going to say basically right here, it's going to say that you already have this generated most likely. Do you want to overwrite it? In that case, you can just rename it to something else, like user-friendly like we did. So we'll say my new 4096 RSA key, and leave the passphrase empty unless you're processing credit cards, and you should know if you are. And the same passphrase again, blank, and there it is. So now if we do an ls my new star, we can see we have the private key and the .pub for public key. So whenever somebody wants you to paste your key, you're going to paste your public key. That's the key that you can hand out 100,000 times. Nobody ever gets your private key except for a few select programs on your local system usually. And that's how that works. So we've generated a key a couple different ways on here. And now we need to go in and set that up and paste it in here. So we go into our user account, and we click our username to get there. And this is one way to get there, and go to credentials, or right down here on the side, users and keys, and that will just take you straight to that credentials tab that we were just at. Or at least that's what I thought it did. So if you go to that and then click your account page, maybe it will take you there. Yeah, okay. That's the other way to get there. Re-enter your password. And you can see I already have a key in, but yours will probably just say add SSH key. Go ahead. You can nickname it anything you want. But of course, make sure and follow these rules. And then to paste that in there, we'll need to go grab it up to paste it in there. So I have it in two different spots for mine. I can go to my home folder and then go down to my new key, my new public, remember? So I'm going to right click and go open it with something that won't take 10 years to launch. I don't know why that's defaulting to LibreOffice Draw. Edit will work. Maybe it won't. Okay, so then I can hit Control A to select all, Control C, or you can go Edit, select all, Edit, Copy, and then we can come over here. And of course, if you use the Get, then it's going to, if you didn't use Get, if you did it that method, then you've got your key. Hang on tight just a second. If you use Get, then you'll need to go to your program files folder. Or no, you won't. You'll need to go, that was if you use Get. If you saved it in your temp folder like I did with one of your working folder, then ppk is the private key file. This one is your pub, so you can right click, open with, and then Control A, Control C. Go over here, Control Paste, right click, paste, add key. It didn't like it. If it says, if it's got this kind of stuff on it, it's not going to like it. So that was what I do wrong there. My new key, cat, my new .pub. That's the format we want right there. So why didn't the other one work? Oh. So the weird thing is with Putty, the weird thing with Putty is that if you save your public key, it saves it in an incompatible format that's virtually worthless for everything I've ever tried in my life. But if you open Putty Keygen, tell it to load your private key file, pick that same one, then it will regenerate your public key. And if you can see right here, it starts with this R. There's none of that. Like if we go back over here, see how there's this line with these like dashes and then these capital letters, and then there's this line, and it says comment, and then there's your key. That's not the stuff you want. Let's see if we can fix it. This doesn't usually work either, but I'll go ahead and try it. Yeah, they're not going to take this. It's close, but it's still not good enough. So that's just an example to show you. So the weird thing with Putty is don't even bother saving your public key, because it's just going to cause you all sorts of confusion. Do save your private key. You can regenerate your public key from your private key. And then Control right click, select all, right click, copy. And this one, I'm going to Control A, Control V to paste, and this will work. And there you can see my new key was added. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the get for, oh, I have to use underscores, for win. I'm going to do the same thing with that. So that's in my username folder. And my new key pub, open with, edit, Control A, Control C. And you can tell this one's a very similar format to the one that worked before as well. So there it is. It just says, you know, SSH-RSA on one line, and then when you get down to the bottom, it says equals equals. It may say nothing here. It might say something like this. Anyway, that should work. And it did. So now I have all these extra keys that I don't need, so I'm going to remove them, which is going to load my email with cool messages, but better than having to go back later and do it. You shouldn't remove them. You'll need one key in there. So this is my key that I generated earlier that's already been propagated and everything, so that's the one I'm going to stick with. Go right here to sites to get back there. And then manage. This will break it up into the dev, staging, prod.